Hey, if you want to watch a great podcast that none of us are on, check out Best Movies Never Made. Available every other Monday from screenwriter Josh Miller and producer Steven Scarlatta, as they go behind the scenes of some of the greatest movies never made, with fantastic guests like
Steve Melching,
Ashley Miller,
and a lot of other people you have heard of.
And not Darren Doctorman.
Yet.
Oh.
I don't know. Maybe you'll be on the show. They just invited me to be on an episode about James Bond. I wonder why. Maybe it's because I have a new book out called Nobody Does It Better, The Oral History of James Bond, available now wherever you get your books.
Hello. I am not Spock, but if I were, I would tell you to listen to the Inglorious Trexperts, in which our Trexperts talk Trek every Saturday, wherever you listen to podcasts. Oh, and live long and whatever.
Hey, this is Mark A. Altman, and if you're a Star Trek fan and you haven't already picked up the hardcover edition of the 50-Year Mission, it's time for you to go out and get the paperback version of the 50-Year Mission, which is just out in paperback from St. Martin's Press. This is the complete oral history of Star Trek, the first 25 years, from me and Ed Gross. And if you think you know everything there is to know about Star Trek, think again. The 50-Year Mission, out in paperback now. And if you can't read, the audiobook is still available. Hey, this is Mark A. Altman. If you've been enjoying listening to us, imagine how entertaining we'll be when you are watching us. Now you can watch the 4:30 movie with
Steve Melching,
Darren Doctorman,
Ashley Miller,
and me, Mark A. Altman, every day on Electric Now. How do you get Electric Now? You download Distro TV, Stirr TV, Xumo TV, and soon the Electric Now app. And
you just have to pick one. You don't have to have all of them.
You don't have to have all of them, but it helps. And you can watch us on the Electric Now channel. Don't miss us as we bring you the 4:30 movie in your house in person.
Back in the 70s and 80s, before the advent of VHS, chances are if you saw a classic movie, it was on the 4:30 movie. With their famous theme weeks, it was a chance to see movies you'd never seen before and get reacquainted with some old classics. So now, join us for the 4:30 movie.
Hey, this is Mark A. Altman, and welcome to the Final Frontier Week. This is Great Space Movies, and I got some space cadets with me right now. Steve Melching.
Hi there.
Mr. Darren Doctorman.
It's the Great Space Movie. Get on board.
And Lost in Space, Mr. Ashley Miller.
I have the greatest enthusiasm for the podcast, Mark.
We have an exciting week. Now, we've done spacey type movies in the past. We did In the Shadow, Star Wars Week, which was sort of our kickoff, where we talked about movies that were inspired by Star Wars. So and that was a great week.
Right.
You can check it out. Go back and listen to it. Not available on video, only on audio, because we weren't recording them on video back then.
Why don't you go check it out?
Yes, why don't you do that?
It's a little shining.
And then, of course,
Spacey.
we did In the Shadow of Star Trek Week,
Right.
which also dealt with some of the same kind of spaciness. And now we're going to deal with The Final Frontier. It's great space movies.
That are not Star Trek or Star Wars.
That are not Star Trek or Star Wars. That's a very important caveat because those tend to dominate the conversation. Star Trek, Star Wars, Star Wars, Star Trek. But we are going to have a conversation about movies that aren't Star Wars or Star Trek.
Which is why I'm picking Star Trek 09.
And... Okay. Yeah, I'd like to see you do that. I'd really like to see you do that. Okay. Well, that's great. Tastes great, more, less filling. So, God, we're all huge fans of space movies, aren't we?
Sure.
Why not?
I think we all grew up with, I watched a lot of space on television in the form of Star Trek. And then, of course, Star Wars came along, and there was a lot of space movies coming out in its wake, In the Shadow.
Now, technically, all movies are set in space.
Yes.
Yeah.
Why the fascination with space, you think, Aaron?
Well, it's
Whatever your name is.
It's because it is the great frontier that most people have not experienced personally, and so movies are the only way that we can, be there.
Yeah,
and it's still, it feeds the explorer nature in human beings.
Has it replaced the Western in a sense?
Well, it obviously has.
Yeah, I mean, but
the
like,
Western is
the
gone.
Western was about exploring the frontier,
Yeah.
and now
everyone moved out west, so
So it's not so
it
exciting.
ain't so. It ain't so friendly.
We're in the West right now.
We speak to you from the West in space.
And what about you? I mean, you're a big fan of movies in space. What is it about the space that captivates us so much, you think, Ashley?
Honestly, it's a little bit scary. Like, even when the movies themselves aren't
And a little bit rock and roll.
And a little bit rock and roll. I mean, there's, especially when we're talking about, we're not talking about romps, right? When we're talking about, these sort of adventures or sort of very grounded films set in space. I mean,
something like Guardians of the Galaxy is a romp.
Or Ice Pirates, right?
Or Ice Pirates.
Right. But it's that sense that anything can happen, right? It's like speaking of Ice Pirates, I mean, there's Ice Pirates and then there's Alien, right? I mean, that's quite a spectrum that we can identify.
What I love about Ice Pirates is when
everything.
When they were doing when Gene Roddenberry and Bob Justman and Eddie Milkis were getting ready to do Star Trek: The Motion Picture, and David Gerrold and DC Fontana were getting ready to do Star Trek: The Next Generation. They would screen just like they did for the original. They had screened a bunch of classic movies, sci-fi movies, to get into the like we watch a Blu-ray before you start a script. If you're writing a spy movie, you watch a lot of spy movies.
Right.
So they did a screening at Paramount. And they watched, all the classics, that you would expect, like, Day the Earth Stood Still and all those great sci-fi classics, and Ice Pirates. And Gene was like, let's do something not like that. But that was one of the movies that they watched to try and see what was going on in the genre at the time.
Space herpes is very scary, in fairness.
Space herpes. That's right. That's right. Okay, so we're going to talk about space movies, great space movies. And there are a lot of them, and certainly it's a subject we're very familiar with, something we talk about on our sister podcast, Inglorious Trexperts.
Right.
Where we talk
Ad
about,
nauseum.
Indeed.
We talk about space.
Well, it's funny because a couple of weeks ago on the podcast, we had Aaron Gray, right?
Yes.
And I was very curious to see how that would go over because, of course, it wasn't strictly a Star Trek podcast. We got her in on the thinnest of the, basically she had auditioned for Voyager.
Right.
So that was the way in.
Right.
But then we didn't really talk about Star Trek. We talked about Buck Rogers and the Battle Network Stars. And all. People loved that podcast.
I
It's
love
a
that
great
podcast,
episode.
Yeah.
And I think because we've talked about how sustainable is this, talking about Star Trek.
Right.
Obviously, we'll continue to talk about Star Trek, but I think we can broaden Inglorious. It's shown that we can do like all the stuff that meant like Star Trek. Like we could do Planet of the Apes or at least the Planet of the Apes TV series because like Mark Leonard was in it. Like I think we can broaden our focus a little bit.
A new frontier.
Indeed, a final
But not
frontier.
the final one.
So so I just something to keep in mind while we're
The
sitting
penultimate
here.
frontier.
Because see, we don't really talk when we're not on camera. We're actually not really that friendly. So when we're together, we can figure all these things out.
That's right.
Well, the last time we all went out together was like Buka, and man, God, that was not pleasant. That was, I mean, you guys were. The company was
The
pleasant.
company was awful.
But the food, man, I can't eat like, when I was 20s, it was fine. But it's like now I cannot eat like that. I mean, all that family style, just constantly bringing us pasta and things. And
Well, you don't have to eat all of it.
yeah, I
that's
know.
the
I wish
answer.
you'd told me before. Okay.
I did.
We tried to tell
You like pizza?
I like pizza.
you. You love Italian.
You love Italian? So do I. Okay, so space movies.
Space
movies.
Space is the place.
Space pictures.
Okay, Steve Melching, Monday. What's it going to be?
Okay, Monday, this was a tough choice. So I'm going to go with The Usual Suspects.
I picked that a couple of weeks ago for Cops and Robbers Week.
That's right. Not Kevin Spacey movies. Space movies.
See, I didn't even know where you're going with that. I had
Carrie.
no idea.
The
That's
joke
really...
was so bad that nobody got it.
No, that was really funny. But the payoff was good.
I'll go with Carrie because it's a SpaceX movie.
Oh, nice. I see. Yeah, that's good.
Do I see Carrie for 200?
Now, I'll get to my out of the box choice at the back end of the show. So my choice for Monday is not so much a space movie, but a movie about the race to get into space.
Oh,
So I'm going to go with... That's right. That's 1983's The Right Stuff.
Great.
Directed by Philip Kaufman and written by Philip Kaufman, based on the Tom Wolfe book.
Their stuff is so right. They've got such right stuff. They've all had the right stuff. I'm not going to continue that.
And the best adaptation of a Tom Wolfe novel, for sure.
But I just love this movie. It's if you haven't seen it, treat yourself.
They're remaking it.
What?
I think as
they
a
are.
as a
TV
miniseries.
Yeah,
Oh, that's
yeah,
right. I
yeah.
saw that as a
TV
well. It was a
miniseries.
hefty tome. I've never read it actually. To my shame, I have not read the.
I've never read it either.
I have.
and I've wanted to. It's on
fascinating.
my list of movies. That and The Power Broker by by Robert Caro. I wanted those are two big giant tomes.
yeah.
You know what else I want to recommend?
Oh God.
Well,
Here we
Paul,
go.
hit the pause.
50-year. No, nobody does it better. The complete oral history of James Bond. Hefty book.
The 60-year mission.
And it's great. And I don't always say this about my books, but when I do, I highly recommend it.
Well, you know what? There is a space movie in the James Bond franchise.
But we picked it for In the Shadow of Star Wars week. Now, technically, we could pick it again because it's a new season, but I don't think we will.
No, we've said all there needs to be said about Moonraker. But
You have
we have
Moonraker
not
eyes.
said everything about The Right Stuff,
have
which
not.
covers the period of 1947 to about 1963. It basically covers from the breaking of the sound barrier by Chuck Yeager, played by Sam Shepard, through the Mercury astronaut program, Star Voyager program. And it is just a wonderful movie. It is heroic. It's funny. It's really funny. It's kind of a satire. It's
Absolutely brilliant performances by every actor.
I mean, this
in it.
cat, Sam Shepard as Chuck Yeager. You got Ed Harris as John Glenn, Dennis Quaid as Gordo Cooper, Fred Ward as Gus Grissom, Scott Glenn as Alan Shepard, Lance
So great.
Henriksen as Wally Schirra. You have Barbara Hershey and Veronica Cartwright and Mary Jo Deschanel. Harry Shearer and Jeff Goldblum
Oh,
as
my
this
God.
kind of comedy duo.
They're R2 and 3PO.
They really
Yeah.
are.
Yeah.
Trying to put together the astronauts for the Mercury program. They're hilarious.
I love this movie.
Yeah, you got that the Bill Conti score that Mark was singing earlier. Just a terrific
Dun,
score.
dun, 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 dun. And I never understood because Perez Sarabande came out with the LP, and it was split with North and South,
Right.
which is a miniseries he scored. But who cares about North and South, other than the fact that Frakes was in it?
Well, they had to fill out the CD.
I know,
and
but
they
I just
didn't
wanted
have
to write
enough.
stuff, even if it was thin.
Well,
Even if-
there is a re-release of The Right Stuff, the entire actual
Oh,
movie
is there?
score.
I don't have it.
The movie recording.
Oh, I want that.
It's out there.
Oh, I gotta get that.
I gotta
too.
get that. Do you know who put that
I
out?
think La La Land did.
No,
I'm not sure.
no, I don't think it was. La La
Maybe it
Land.
was Perez again.
I love
But it's
La La
there.
Land.
It exists.
And speaking of La La Land, the soundtrack to Pandora is now out on La La Land by Joe Kramer and Panka Konavia, so you should definitely pick that up.
La La Land is great. They put out so many great scores.
La La Land.
But
Land's
the
fantastic.
Right Stuff has Caleb Deschanel was the cinematographer and
Husband to Mary Jo.
husband to Mary Jo and father to Zoe
and the other one.
The other.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Caleb Deschanel is his
Yes.
father. Really?
How many Deschanels do you know?
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew it was married Joe Deschanel's because that's how he ended up, I think, shooting a couple episodes of Twin Peaks.
Twin Peaks,
He
yeah,
directed a couple episodes of Twin Peaks. But
Emily
Deschanel.
Deschanel,
Zoe
that's right.
oh, that's
Deschanel.
so interesting. I had no idea.
It's a legacy.
He's such a great cinematographer. I mean, he
Absolutely.
shot The Natural. I mean, my God, that movie is just amazingly
Every
shot.
frame of The Right Stuff is beautiful. The shots where Sam Shepard is like sitting inside like the Bell X1 and he's kind of like looking up and it's like and everything is reflected off of like the top of the cockpit.
sunlight
and
is
just the
moving
sunlight.
around.
Yeah, 'cause I think
It's awesome.
if the 70s belonged to Gordy Willis, then the 80s belonged to Caleb Deschanel, and the 90s and everything else belongs to Roger Deakins.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, yeah, I mean, you have other great, obviously Storaro, and I mean, there's so many other great. But to me, it's like, Caleb Deschanel was just amazing.
And I came to this movie a little late too. We lived up in the mountains in Colorado Springs when I was in high school. So getting down to a movie theater to see a new movie took a little bit of effort. You know, it was a 45-minute to an hour drive, and I was dependent on my parents, to get me a ride down there. So one night, the whole family decided to go out to the movies, and my mom and dad went to see The Right Stuff, and I went down the street to see the James Bond movie.
1983, let me guess. Was it either Octopussy or Never Say Never Again?
Never Say Never Again. And because I was into James Bond, and I thought the movie was fine. I liked Never Say Never Again well enough, but it was a
At
couple
the
years
time.
at the time.
Yeah, doesn't hold up.
And then the movie came out on home video, and that was one of the movies that's so long. It's 3 hours long. It was double VHS set.
Double VHS set. Yep.
Yeah, and I remember bringing that home. Yeah, it's like, oh, this is a real important movie. Like
I think
The
I
Godfather
rented it a couple of times before I
cassettes.
actually looked at it.
Yeah,
because it
and
was so intimidating.
So finally watched it on home video. That was unfortunately my first experiences on VHS tape, but have since corrected that. And I think Darren and I did we go to the 20th anniversary screening at the Egyptian Theater?
We did.
And the suite of guests they had at that
was amazing.
They had, the Deschanel family was there. And Zoe, I remember seeing Zoe and thinking, my God, this woman is luminous. But some of the real astronauts.
Was that what you thought?
Some of the real astronauts were there.
Like a star.
Yeah, and half the cast was there. I mean, it was a really fantastic evening, and it was great to see it on the big screen and with the sound design and everything. This is a movie that won 4 Oscars for editing, score, sound, and sound effects editing. And Sam Shepard was nominated for Best Supporting Actor, and it was also nominated for Art Direction, Cinematography, and Best Picture.
It kind of bombed when it came out.
It really did, yeah.
Yeah, it did.
And I did see it in a theater when it was first released, and I loved it. And when it was later on TV, like everything else, I audio recorded it and listened to it over and over again. And the sound of the movie is so good too, and just hearing the dialogue go back and forth is miraculous. And all these great actors making every moment real is great. And when I went to USC the first semester I was there, they had a class called 190 that shows you a whole bunch of movies, and they showed The Right Stuff in the Norris Theater, and it was freaking amazing. The best presentation I'd ever seen of it at that time, and I love this movie. I love it, love it, love it, and I wish that it had been bigger in terms of the popular reception.
Well, it's not like there would have been a sequel.
Ah,
There could have been. Yeah.
there are a couple,
First Man.
there are a couple of directors that we really extolled, like John Borman, Alan Parker, who don't get their due, right? Phil Kaufman is one of those guys because he's such a chameleon.
Right.
You look at Unbearable Lightness of Being, Invasion of the Body Snatchers. I mean, he helped come up with a story for Raiders of the Lost Ark. This guy could do anything, and so overlooked. Doesn't get the credit that he deserves because he's just done so many amazing movies.
And how would it have been if he had done the first Star Trek movie?
Oh, I wish.
As he had planned to
I
do.
wish. I mean, could you only imagine? Would have been incredible if he'd done Planet of the Titans, just to see what he would have done.
Yeah.
And he never became a household name, but he was in that company of Lucas and Spielberg
Coppola and all those.
Yeah, and just so thoughtful. He really was the thinking man. You get a sense of a real cerebral director at work. Whether it's Unbearable Lightness of Being or Henry and June, just a really talented guy. And Right Stuff is probably his, maybe his greatest movie.
And he came late to this project. It was in development for a couple of years, and none other than William Goldman wrote an adaptation of the book initially that omitted all the Chuck Yeager stuff. It was strictly about the Mercury program. And when Philip Kaufman came on, he felt that story was a really important counterpoint to the Mercury astronauts. So he apparently rewrote or wrote his adaptation in like 8 weeks.
Wow.
To get the movie off the ground.
And again, it is telling these stories as if they are mythical.
Yes.
It is completely poetic, and these astronauts are mythic beings.
Yeah.
But we see them as humans.
Yes.
And we also see the difference between their public perception and their private perception.
Oh, yeah.
The whole story with Ed Harris as John Glenn and his relationship with Mary Jo Deschanel, plays his wife, is so touching. It's so moving how loving he is of her and how protective he is of her.
She has a phobia of being in crowds and speaking because she has a little bit of a speech impediment, and she's very very internal. And he is very protective of her when the press is going after her and the vice president is going after her to get him to play along. He knocks that completely out and protects her, and it's a great sort of side story.
Everybody in that movie is great. Fred Ward, like just
oh my God.
it's kind of crushing and heartbreaking. Dennis Quaid as
cocky
as Gordo Cooper, like, and he has, I think,
arguably he is the framework that the whole
100%.
story goes
yeah,
on.
and it ends like on that wonderful moment, like for a brief moment. Gordo Cooper was the greatest pilot anyone had
fastest
ever
man
seen.
alive,
It's awesome.
The most touching moment in the movie, to me, is the scene near the end where they are all in that big Texas barbecue, and the fan dancer is doing her Claire de Lune dance, and we cut to all the astronauts sort of, they're not paying attention to anything. They're just looking at each other and saying, "Yeah, we've experienced something that no other people have ever experienced. We've been up there," and this sort of shared experience thing that. You also see that in Lord of the Rings when the hobbits come back and they're in the bar, and it's a bonding that can never be torn apart, and it's so moving, and it's very emotional.
But then it's cross-cut with my other favorite sequence in the movie, which is Sam Shepard as Chuck Yeager going up in his F-104, that silver fighter, pushing the envelope, getting up into space.
He has never given up on what he does his entire life.
And then the plane, he ejects from the plane, and that amazing shot of him in that silver suit with the smoke coming off his helmet as he just drifts away into the mists. It's absolutely, and the music that's playing there, it always gives me a chill. And unfortunately, the original stunt person for that, the original parachutist, died making the movie. His parachute didn't open, and when they were rehearsing to film that sequence. But it's a tremendous poetic sequence. That's a wonderful counterpoint to the scene that Darren was talking about.
Pre-CG, and it's all beautiful.
Yeah.
Sam Shepard sidebar. Sam Shepard is just evidence that life is not fair. You have a guy who is that good on screen, that good an actor. He is an amazing writer, and he looks like that. Yeah. What the hell? How is that?
See, God
even
does
fair?
give with two hands.
Yeah, he does give with two hands.
He died too
He's married to
Jessica Lange.
Jessica Lange.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, his life was terrible, obviously.
I love True West. I remember seeing a PBS production of True West on TV when I was in high school, and it just blew. I went right out and bought a collection of Sam Shepard plays to read, and I directed a scene from it in one of my directing classes. Nice. He's such a anyway.
That's cool. Well, that's a fantastic,
good Monday.
Fantastic Monday.
And we're out of time.
Let's go to and the right stuff warrants that kind of conversation because, of course, it's a truly spectacular film. Darren, Tuesday.
The two movies in my mind, I think I've picked both of them, but I don't care because we're in 2020 now.
Read his mind.
I think you can.
That's right.
No, although it is a space movie.
Yes, it is. It happens.
He's from another planet.
Yes,
Krypton.
I have to go with the, in my mind, greatest space movie ever made, and that is 1968, 2001, A Space Odyssey.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. It has been quoted and emulated unsuccessfully for 50 years. Everyone tries to shoot at this target, and they've missed by a long shot.
But you keep on missing the target.
Because I think no one who is trying to emulate the feeling of it knows what that feeling actually is. It's not telling a story about going into space. It's taking the audience into space. That's what it does. And it's not about the story, it's not about the dialogue, it's not about the acting. It's about being in space and first seeing how mundane sometimes it is. It's seeing how creepy it is. It's seeing how strange it is to be relying on tools to sustain your life. It is as we've talked about it before, it's the constant struggle of mankind to eat. And at all the stages that we see in mankind, they are eating.
Like Buca di Beppo.
Yes, like Buca di
Just
Beppo.
like Buca di Beppo.
And it's a huge mythic story. Again, there's that mythic quality. And it's told in sometimes a very straightforward way. These two guys are getting a cup of coffee and a sandwich on the moon. And it's amazing how droll it is sometimes. It's just sort of these throwaway scenes that are surrounded by unbelievable environments. And it is subtle, and it is, some I hesitate to say younger audience members may say, "Oh, it's so boring."
Yeah,
But that's not the point.
they need to see it on the big screen.
You need to see it. You
can't watch
need
it
to
at
see it
home.
on the big screen. Have a big screen at home. You need to experience it and be engulfed by it, because that's the kind of movie it was intended to be, and has always been. And it doesn't work in anything less, unfortunately.
Did you read the book Space Odyssey? I didn't write it, but Space Odyssey about the making of it.
The one that came out a couple years ago.
Yeah, it's really quite good.
Absolutely. It's interesting because of all these, the struggle to make the movie and to deal with Kubrick as a creative entity and solve all these problems bit by bit that they did, because none of this had been attempted to this scale before. And daily he was putting things on screen that had never been done successfully before. And the process of going from a zero-sum start and building on everything and figuring out new ways to do things is miraculous. And the fact that, so many people who have become sort of legends in not only the movie industry, but in, the creative industry, got their start on that and continued on is just amazing. And I've been able to have some time with Douglas Trumbull, who
You interviewed him for the podcast.
I interviewed him for Inglorious Trexperts, and he started working on that movie when he was 24 years old, based on a force of sheer will and guts, and calling Kubrick at home and saying, "Hey, I was just laid off by this company that you were hiring to do the work in Los Angeles. I want to work on your movie." And Kubrick said, "Okay, I'll send you a couple tickets. Come on out." And, 4 years later, they finished the movie. But it's such, not only was it made the year before we actually went to the moon. Some people say, "Oh, he just cheated. He shot it in space." It has never been matched in terms of its realness and the feeling of actually being there. And you hear this from actual astronauts. They say, "Yeah, that's what it's like." It's amazing.
Yeah, I'm not surprised that's your pick. It's certainly a worthy one. You can't talk about space without talking about 2001: A Space Odyssey. And I thought it was interesting in the book where they talked about it. Really, as you tell, it's an interesting way of retelling the Odyssey. And I hadn't really ever thought of that. And I thought it was an interesting observation. But what a remarkable movie, technologically, storytelling. And it had such an impact on all the sci-fi movies of the 70s. And then occasionally you see people trying to do it again. De Palma did it with his Mission to Mars, and no one ever gets close to, and no one could risk it because it's sort of the mundane. You hit the nail on the head. No one's going to tell a story that mundane.
It's like trying to emulate whale song. You can duplicate the sounds, but not the language.
Just like in Star Trek 4.
No, that's exactly what that reference
But
was.
it's also a great mystery. I mean,
Yes.
at its heart is this mystery of, the origins of life and this signal and traveling to the moon and having this kind of secret meeting and sending out this ship to discover this discovery, to discover
It's
what's
funny.
going on.
That's why
It's literally a mystery box.
yeah.
Literally.
Yeah.
they ask the questions, but no
It's a
answers.
conspiracy thriller. I mean,
I do, at the time, I enjoyed 2010 for what it was.
Right.
But it was sort of a hopeless, to try and, sequelize. Now, obviously, Arthur Clarke had written the books, many of them.
Right.
But it's an interesting movie in its own way. You can't really judge it against 2001.
Right.
But like Roy Scheider is obviously a much more dynamic Haywood Floyd.
Well, it's like comparing the animated Star Trek series to the original TV
Sure,
series.
yeah. But it's not a movie without that I would say you should dismiss.
It's not without merit.
Yeah. And it's...
If you like science fiction made on the Lifetime channel.
But yeah, 2001 is just such a... It's one of the great movies of all time. Yeah. Spectacular. Kubrick, as we've talked about many times on the show, true genius.
And it's a horrible date movie, by the way. Just to let you know.
Not as horrible as The Exorcist. Let me just tell you.
I think that depends on the girl.
Yeah, that's true. Well, if you're dating my wife.
Well, you've gone
I'm
to
not
some
at this
real
point.
winners with her. It's amazing. Jen is a very good to put up with you.
Yeah, no kidding.
Okay, so 2001: A Space Odyssey, directed by Stanley Kubrick, is our Tuesday pick. Wednesday, that brings us to you, Ashley. Great space movies, or not great space, just space movies.
I had so many in mind that I could have picked, but I sense an amazing opportunity that may never come again.
Oh my God.
Uh-oh.
Oh my
I mean,
put your seatbelts on, folks.
It's
going to be a bumpy night.
Should I do it? Should I not do it? I think, you know what? Yeah.
Oh my God.
I'm going to do it.
Do it.
Spaceballs. Kidding. I am actually... Okay.
I can't wait.
I'm going to just set everybody's Wayback Machine to Guilty Pleasures Week last year, right? 2001 came up. Why? Because I said, we were all admitting great movies that we didn't necessarily like. And I admitted that, I completely recognize that 2001 is a great movie.
Right.
But I just don't enjoy it.
Totally legitimate.
Right. So that brings me to my pick for today, which we've mentioned. I'm going to pick 2010, The Year We Made Contact, directed by Peter Hyams.
Yes. Wow.
And I'll tell you why. Because I think, it is operating in the shadow of a Titan, right? There's absolutely no question. But as a science fiction film, in its own right, as a science fiction film that is trying to do something different than, say, the Aliens of the world, or the Star Treks, or the Star Wars, or any of sort of the high adventure movies, I mean, it really is trying to do something different. Even as a sequel, if we consider it a sequel, and I guess, although it's an adaptation of a book, right, that Arthur C. Clarke wrote, that it's
not a sequel to 2001.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's kind of its own thing. And as Mark pointed out, I think that Roy Scheider was incredible because he's always charismatic. He was incredibly charismatic in that film. I think Peter Hyams, who is he's kind of up and down as a director, but I think that he can really shoot some beautiful looking film. And also, I'll tell you what's interesting about that movie, even though we don't necessarily talk about it much as a film when we're sort of talking about the history of the genre, there are things about it that stick, and I think we don't even know why, right? Like the message, right? All these worlds are yours. Save Europa. Attempt no landings there.
Right.
That's just a thing, man. I think if you said that, people would know immediately what you were talking about, even if
they hadn't seen the movie.
Exactly, which is quite an accomplishment. And I just liked, the character story there. I liked kind of the story of American and Soviet cooperation. And I loved, just even though I still think about it, just that idea of Jupiter, becoming a star. There are things about that I just find so kind of evocative and cool.
Sure.
And
Well,
I
it has
think
some great visuals of its own. Was it the Leonov? Was that the,
Yeah.
the
That's
ship
the-
with the big
Yep.
rotating
I
section
love
that
Leonov.
creates
I used to
artificial
draw
gravity?
that like
Yeah.
all the time. Like,
Helen
I love-
Miranda's in it.
Yeah.
Helen
Helen
Miranda's in
Mirren,
it. Yeah. And then you also have, I mean, the fact that Doug Rain was back doing the voice of Hal, and of course, Keir Dullea, and it's. I mean, to me, that, and I like 2010 too. It's kind of that weird '80s phenomenon, like that Psycho 2. It's like, what you can do a sequel to Psycho, and at that time it seemed like this 20 years later, right? Like, and Psycho was like this unique product of its time, shot in black and white by Hitchcock, and you're going to do a sequel to it, and like Psycho 2 is not an awful movie. You know, it shouldn't have been made, but it's not an awful movie.
Right.
And it's the same thing with 2010. It shouldn't have been made. It's crazy. But it's not awful.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, the spacewalk sequence is pretty awesome when they have to go from the Leonov to the Discovery. That's a really cool sequence.
It is.
Yeah.
And I'm with you, Ashley. I really like the sort of geopolitical stuff with the U.S. astronauts going on to the Russian ship and dealing with the Soviets and the whole war brewing back on Earth and until Jupiter ignites as a new star in the sky. It's cool stuff. I want to say I think I saw 2010 in its entirety before I saw 2001 in its entirety. Because I saw 2010 in the theaters, I think twice. And I don't think I had seen clips or bits of 2001 on television. And I think it wasn't until after I'd seen 2010 until I rented 2001, another two VHS tape movie. Yeah. It's therefore important.
Right.
and watched it at home.
I think it was also the first time for me watching a science fiction film that's set in space where I actually truly appreciated that space is big. You know what I mean? Like that.
Really
I got a
big.
sense
You won't
of
believe how vastly, hugely, mind-bogglingly big it is.
It is exactly that idea of distance just had never quite scanned for me. Because look, we get spoiled by hyperspace and by warp drive and by all of that. And because it always felt like there was a tether, between our characters and Earth, right? I always felt that yawning distance that I had never quite felt before. Other small things like that just struck me at the time watching it were things like a video phone, right? Which now we're like, of course, but then I was like, well, we won't have that by 2010. Well, apparently we did. Thanks, Steve Jobs, just in time. So, I mean, it's its own fascinating little experience that I think is worth the watch.
Yeah. I think it's a great description of it. It's like no one's going to compare it to 2001 and say, oh, this is a masterpiece or a fitting sequel. But at the same time, I remember it was sort of rushed into production by MGM. One of the reasons they hired Peter Hyams was because he could, the book was a bestseller. It was very successful. And one of the reasons they hired him, he was his own DP, director, writer. He was like, he could come in, he could do it.
I don't think he was DP on it.
Was he not?
Yes, he was.
Was he?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I thought that happened later.
And they figured that they would bring him in and he could do it quickly.
Yeah.
Because MGM,
he could get it done.
Because MGM at the time, they were prepping for a sale. It was, I think, during that whole Peretti mess. And so, like, they figured, like, this was like their franchise.
Right.
Like, they could do, and, they were trying to mine the library, much like people are today. It's like, 2001 is like one of our most famous movies. But how do you do a sequel? And then the book was successful, so.
This is the first time I'm going to plug my site, renegadecommentaries.com, renegadecommentary.com. I have several movies up there that influenced me during my lifetime that I do full-length commentaries on. And up on there is my commentary on 2010 and 2001. But you'll hear on the 2010 one, it's a movie that I don't love, but I like it.
Mm-hmm.
And I point out all the bad things that I think about it, but also the good things too. Right. And it's I have a love-hate relationship with it. But anyway.
Yeah, fair
Great.
enough.
That's Renegade.
Renegadecommentary.com.
Okay.
The other thing you should check out, Steve, for those of you watching at home on video, is wearing a very cool 430 movie. This is our Close Encounters homage.
Yes.
And if you want to check out a bunch of themed 430 logo wear,
430movie.com.
you can go to 430movie.com. Also, I'm wearing the Psycho one.
There you go.
Psycho 2.
and I'm wearing our 430 movie.
And I am wearing a polo shirt, but I can't tell you where it's from.
So check that out for some great 430 movie swag at 430movie.com. Okay.
Which brings us to
Thursday.
So I'm curious, Mark, because so far our 3 picks for Final Frontier Space Week are all sort of NASA type movie, like sort of grounded in harder science fiction.
Oh,
So
well.
I'm curious to see where
fear
you're gonna
not,
go.
because I'm here. And, in honor of the 4:30 movie, I think it's only appropriate that we show a movie that was on the 4:30 movie, The Green Slime. No, I'm not going to go with The Green Slime. Although that was on the 4:30 movie, and it would be thoroughly appropriate for this week. But honestly, I don't want to watch it again. So I want to put a movie on that I would watch. And again, I'm done with the NASA. I love First Man. But one of the things I love about space movies. I don't like the science advisor coming saying, well, it wouldn't make sound in space, and the thing in the nebula and a black hole wouldn't really work like that, and Hans Reinhardt couldn't really keep the sickness out there. And
So Jessica von Puttermaker is right out.
So yeah, so I like the crazy sci-fi. I like the sci-fi of the imagination as opposed to the realistic sci-fi. I know you guys are all very science now. I have nothing but mad respect for all that, but it's not my that's not my bag.
I love a good space movie too.
So I mean, I love it. I mean, I really like First Man. I love all the movies you've talked about. So I don't know why I'm
Apollo
saying
13
I don't.
or
So
Gravity.
Yeah. I'm not. Gravity's fine. Apollo 13 I like.
Space
but,
Cowboys, perhaps.
But I'm going to go with more my speed.
All right.
Because it has it all. It has space. It has war. It has sexy young 20-year-old.
I know what it is.
It's. Would you like to know more?
I would like to know more.
Would you like to know more? It's Starship Troopers.
Oh,
Starship Troopers. We have not had it on the show before. And there are a lot of people out there who hate this movie. They say, oh, the performances are wooden. It's over the top. It's ridiculous. It's freaking great. And, people forget, this was, Verhoeven's a very political filmmaker. Him and Ed Neumeyer, the writer, their statement about what was going on at the time, the mad drive to war in the Middle East, the fake story of the fact that, Iraq had weapons of mass destruction, and how using propaganda and bullshit and weaponizing people like Colin Powell, who people took seriously, to drive us to a war that we shouldn't have been in, and basically turn it into this great sci-fi movie which uses all this sort of Nazi iconography. I love it. And it's a great mix of miniature work and CG, because you got these great lumbering spaceships in battle that are all this fantastic, like the Valley Forge, is gorgeous miniature. I remember they used to have a Sony in this big thing. It was
Not the Valley Forge.
not the Valley Forge.
The Roger Young.
The Roger Young, excuse
Valley
me.
Forge
the
is from
Silent Running.
Silent Running.
My next pick. So no, and then you had the bugs, which were CG, and there's a lot of a Western in this. I mean, one of the virtuoso sequences, which I used as my demo disc for a long time on Laserdisc, later on CD and DVD, was the storming of the fort by when they're trying to hold the line on not on Clendathu. This was Planet P. Planet P.
We're going back to P.
Yeah. So where, they basically they find one survivor, and they realize that there's a brain bug, and the fort is attacked, and it storms the walls, and they have to hold them off before they can get exfil. And it turns out to be Denise Richards, thank God. And it's I love that movie.
Well, it's and the way that scene builds, I mean, you've never seen anything like that before. Like thousands of these bugs swarming down out of the mountains, and then they're holding them off, and the bodies are piling up outside, and then there's flying ones that come in.
And it's smart, and it's funny, and it's ridiculous, and it's pulpy,
sexy.
And it's sexy. I mean, look, this is right after what? It was before Wild Things or after Wild Things, Denise Richards?
Before.
She's playing a moron, but it's okay, because, it's
Certainly before Christmas Jones.
It's before Christmas Jones and Tomorrow Never Dies. I mean, I kind of was into, I liked Denise Richards back then. And
the irony of that, by the way, is just that, look, I love this movie. Like, I deeply love the movie. It has almost, other than some plot similarities, almost zero to do with the Heinlein novel.
Right.
But in the Heinlein novel, the reason why women became pilots and why Denise Richards' character was a pilot was because women were better at math. and you had to be great at math to be a pilot, in that universe. So the irony of her just sort of
casting Denise Richards.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
it's a little bit Christmas Jones, right?
Totally. But all of them were like that because you had Casper Van Dien, who also is very, I mean,
Rock Studley.
There are no rocket scientists in that movie. I mean, other than Michael Ironside, who is vintage Michael Ironside,
so great.
who's fantastic.
The great thing is you have all these pretty young people, and all the older people are completely destroyed.
Yeah.
They're missing pieces, all of them.
Yeah. They're victims of war.
Yeah, and it's just fascinating to see them ushering in the new bunch of meat.
Well, even when they're all excited and jazzed to go to war, and they've all been pumped up, and then they see the haggard people coming off the line, and they're like, "Oh, geez, we were looking forward to this." This is, I mean, and then just the whole and Clancy Brown. How great is that? You guys have both worked with Clancy Brown.
Yes.
How great is he in that movie?
We had it
You can't just say,
Transformers. We had Michael Ironside and Clancy Brown in the same show.
You can't press a button if you disabled his hand.
Oh, so great!
So great. And then also what's his name? Who's a Verhoeven favorite from Breaking Bad is in it. What's his name? God, I'm getting old. I can't remember these off the top of my head. Dean Norris.
Right.
Oh yeah.
I worked with, and he's awesome. Yeah, by the way.
Yeah, and he's great, and he's great in that too. So it's like just a great movie. It looks great. I think the third act isn't as good, but I love you were gonna do. Basil Polidora's score, fantastic. You were going to do a remake or a TV show version or something?
So we were going to do, I guess it's a remake, but really when you're talking about an adaptation where the first adaptation is such a very specific beast, the adaptation we were hired to do was a very sort of straight up adaptation of the Heinlein novel. Mm-hmm. So it was tonally just very different and just had a lot of different things on its mind. Plus, how do you remake that film, right? I mean, that specific film. You can't, right? My God, you know what else is worth a watch just in the context of that movie, just by itself, is watching the movie with Paul Verhoeven's commentary, right? When he starts talking about the bad rap that it got for being pro Nazi and all this, and he's talking when Doogie Howser comes out and he's wearing the long coat, it's bad. How do you know it is not
I'm
bad?
from Holland. I don't like the Nazis.
This is one of those movies that when I saw it, when it came out, was it 97?
Were you with me when we saw it at Sony?
I just remember I didn't really like it that much when I saw it. I was impressed by it, but I didn't like it. I didn't get it, I don't think. I didn't quite get... It wasn't the movie I was trying to fit it into a box that it wasn't supposed to fit in. And so a couple of years later when the DVD came out, I watched it again, of course, and oh my God, I love this movie, and now I love it. But it's one of those...
See, it's interesting because I was a political science major. So, I like stuff that has satire and politics to it. And I prefer, I know you like the hard science. I'm not into hard science. I like pulpy stuff. I grew up, when you were reading, Analog and Fantastic, all those magazines. I love the old pulp stories, the more pulpy stuff, as opposed to, the hardcore side. So, this was the perfect movie for me because it was super pulpy, but it was about something as opposed to just being a big goofy lark.
See, to me, it just felt corny and the humor felt forced to me, and the satire seemed too on the nose for my taste at that point in my life.
Right, yeah.
But subsequently review it, I embraced what it's trying to do, and I really enjoy it.
My only statement about you saying that it's a great looking movie. It's not.
No, it's not a great looking movie.
It has its own style.
Movie. Yeah.
The effects look great. Everything else does not.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
The production design is not
great.
The bridge is awful.
The cinematography is awful.
Yeah,
It's lit like Happy Days.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I completely agree with that. Yeah. And I think that's been true of a lot of his movies. And Joseph Acano, I think, was the DP. Yeah. And it's funny. It's not so much with RoboCop because they had less money, but later you look at a lot of these movies, Total Recall has that problem. Total Recall looks terrible.
Right.
Now I like Total Recall,
although it
also
actually has a style to it.
I mean, it's more so than this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Showgirls has a style.
Yeah, it does.
Oh my God!
Kyle MacLachlan.
My other big memory of this movie is my writing partner at the time was working on the Sony lot when they were shooting this. So it's, you know, when you watch old movies or TV shows that take place in a studio and you're
Right.
always seeing people
Yeah.
walk around in like Roman
Yeah,
costumes
yeah,
or something. There are all these people walking around in these soldier outfits from Starship Troopers on the
funny.
Sony lot, like dozens of them. And I remember we walked into one of the sound stages that they had. It was the bug cave that they crashed down into.
The brain sucking
Oh,
scene.
yeah, yeah.
And walking around that set with this huge, it was massive, and that smell of that foam and paint and everything. I still remember that.
That's funny. The coolest thing I ever had walking on a lot was in 1987. It was my first time in LA. I was on the Paramount lot, and they were shooting Farpoint, and I saw a bunch of people walking around, and that was like awesome. It was amazing. It was like, oh my God, you know, somebody who grew up on Star Trek to like see this like, wow, it was pretty amazing.
I just remember getting onto the Hill Valley Town Square dressed for Back to the Future 2 and getting chased away by security guards.
Oh, that's funny. That's funny. Well, that's my pick for Thursday.
Great.
So let's talk Friday. We got a lot to discuss.
got a lot.
To, as they say, the kids say, unpack in very little time.
I'm going to throw out another Peter Hyams Capricorn 1, even though it doesn't.
But it's about going to
It's
space.
about going to space.
We'll allow it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good, if not an O.J. Simpson week.
Well, then here's another
Peter
Peter
Hyams
Hyams.
week.
It's Peter Hyams week.
Outlandish.
Yeah.
Ah,
Which was on my list.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, Outland, yeah. We'll talk about that at some point in the future, I think.
Mark, I'm surprised you didn't pick Life Force.
You know, we did Life Force and Guilty Pleasures. I think it was Friday,
that's
Guilty
right.
Pleasures. We didn't talk about Forbidden Planet, the Granddaddy, because it was on our In the Shadow of Star Trek week. And you know, one of the great space movies of all time.
Absolutely.
And I think, unfortunately, it is suffering from generational amnesia. So it's like a movie we grew up on, obviously, that we love.
And that has to do with the studio not, you know, being able to sort of bring it forefront again.
Right. Because it would be a great title remake or to a TV series, and the fact that nobody's done anything with it
Is insane.
is insane because it's Star Trek. It's basically Star Trek, and it's a great movie. It's a great movie. Fifth Element,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you know,
The Fifth
fun.
Give me the cash.
Multipass, you know.
I like that movie a lot. Well, I haven't seen it, but Valerian and the City of a Thousand Planets.
See, I don't like Valerian.
It's terrible.
I like Fifth Element, and I was really excited about Valerian, and I was like, unfortunately, it went with all the stuff I didn't like about Fifth Element. It went French, you know, went very that French, you know, that
Suddenly it
weird
became a movie
Luc
from France.
Besson,
Yeah.
you know, as opposed to it's just there's something like all that. All I can say is it's French, and I love the French, and I love France, but there's something about the tone.
It's that pulpy French
metal.
comic.
Yeah,
Metal Houlant, but
yeah.
not in a good way.
Right.
yeah. It was like all that Chris Tucker stuff in Fifth Element was like Valerian was like that whole movie to
Right.
me.
That's true.
Okay, I think I got something that we can all get
How about
behind.
Marooned?
Oh, Maroon is great with Gregory
Because
Peck.
that was on the 4:30 movie.
Yeah, all the time. All the time. That's really funny. This was about an Apollo mission being stuck in space.
Stuck in orbit. Yeah.
With Gregory Peck. Who else was it?
What's his name from Rambo?
Richard Crenna.
Richard Crenna, isn't it?
Yeah. And somebody else.
And somebody else, and I can't remember. It's been
Sorry,
so long.
James Francisco. No. I don't know who the third person was, but I do have a suggestion.
Yeah.
That'll be on the stars. This was, you know.
Didn't we have that?
It
in
was my
Shadow of
very
Star Wars?
first pick.
Oh well, let's skip that then.
No, it wasn't because we did Superhero Week.
Then
first,
you
but
know
it was
what
one
you
of my
know what we
first
should
picks.
do.
Yeah.
We haven't done it yet. Galaxy Quest. That is about people like us being taken into space. It is we can you know
But just
we've never been
the
in space.
disrespect to the television series.
Yeah, I agree.
Galaxy
true.
Quest. I don't know.
It's like it just turned its nose up at the television series.
How would you not? Flash Gordon. Flash Gordon, which is, you know, super fun. Again, we talk about campy,
Right.
pulpy stuff, but, you know, I loved, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago when the Super Bowl was on, you saw that Walmart commercial?
oh yeah.
That was great to have see Sam Jones playing Flash Gordon.
This is probably one that some of you may not have seen, maybe none of you, but I always loved it as a kid. Robinson Crusoe on Mars.
Sure.
I like it. I like it.
It's got Adam West. I mean,
Yeah.
you know,
And
and a monkey.
a monkey.
And Victor, I forget what his last name was.
Victoria.
No, but he was trying for years to get it remade. I remember he came and pitched me on it, and I was like, so you have the rights. He goes, no.
That's your problem. You'll handle that, right?
I'm like, okay, well.
Well, I have a few that I love that I'm
Please.
just going to throw out there. Dune.
Oh, yeah.
Dune. I have a Spice fondness
Oh, I
for
forgot
that.
to tell you, dude.
No, that's for folding space week.
Yeah. And Spice Week.
Moon.
Moon is
Moon's-
great.
Moon's
Yeah.
good, yeah.
I really
Duncan
like.
Jones.
I want to give a shout out to Sunshine.
Sure.
I really
Danny
like.
Boyle.
I even like the ending of Sunshine, but I really like Sunshine. It's a great hard science fiction, segueing into horror.
Yeah.
Interesting movie. I really like it, and it uses an entitled song by my favorite British band, I Am Clute. I was fell out of my chair when they started playing this obscure Brit pop. Alien.
Right.
Talked about
We've
that.
mentioned that
But,
so many times before.
my out of the box pick I mentioned at the top, I almost had a crazy pick, and that was going to be Cosmos, the Carl Sagan television series.
Yeah, but we don't do
But
TV.
it's not a movie.
I know, but that's why it was out of the box.
It's definitely
Way out
of
of
the box.
Interstellar.
In fact, it's in the box.
The box set. The television
Interstellar,
box.
for sure.
Interstellar is in the box.
Interstellar. You know,
You don't have to pick up my pen in the middle
Yeah, I
of
know.
the
It's
show.
going to look
We're like
crazy.
on
I
television
know.
right now.
It's
You're like,
just sort of like, hey.
yeah,
Yeah,
let's try and pretend we're a real
I-
show here.
Yeah.
I hated Interstellar, and I freely admit it.
And you never forgive it for the death of your bull.
What
It's so bombastic and heavy-handed and stupid.
in our Lost episode of 4:30 movie, I picked Serenity. If you remember, we did Joss Whedon week at WhedonCon, and because we didn't have Bill there, the recording didn't come out.
Right.
So, but I picked Serenity, which is a fun capper, a coda to the Firefly saga. It's not a great movie, but it's entertaining. It's nice to see those characters in orbit again.
About something like Pitch Black.
Yeah.
Sure,
Sure,
absolutely.
Yeah, Riddick, Pitch Black again, Pitch Black Redux.
Son of Pitch Black.
Or Event Horizon, another
Right.
space
A lot of people
horror.
love that movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not one of them, but a lot of people love Event Horizon.
It's crazy, literally.
Supernova, which is the same movie.
Oh, yeah, Supernova is like it. I think Event Horizon is. There are a lot of things about it that don't work, but there's something at the center of it that like is interesting and cool and that I dig. And Supernova is like, what if you took all those things at the center of it that like I thought were cool and I dig, and you sort of made them as boring as possible.
I worked for 8 months on Supernova, and it was crazy. And I don't want to go back there.
So we're all agreed on the green slime.
There's Solaris, both
Right.
the original and the,
Both the original and
Soderbergh remake.
And the George Clooney version.
George Clooney.
Forbidden World with Aaron Moran.
Or Buck Rogers in the 25th Century.
That's
'cause
right.
It was released
It was released
theatrically.
theatrically first. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Buck Rogers.
Wall-E.
Wall-E.
That's
yes.
true.
Yeah, that's true.
Mission to Mars.
Right.
Yeah. Although Paul Hirsch just had some great things to say about that in his book.
About his editing.
Editing
I
the
wanna
De
read
Palma
that.
movie and how they had no ending and what a nightmare that was.
That's obvious.
That if you haven't read the Paul Hirsch book, what's it called again? From a Galaxy Far Away or something?
Something like that.
It's a wonderful book about his editing career, just full of great stories, and I highly recommend it if you haven't read it. I think it was some kind of Star Wars thing. Because he cut, of course, Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back. So.
We mentioned it in passing before, but the Black Hole.
We've picked the Black Hole before, haven't we?
Was that in?
In Shadow of Star Wars.
Was it in the Shadow of
We
Star
might
Wars
have.
week? I kind of feel like I picked the Black Hole.
I'm sure you did.
I remember talking about it.
You can pick your.
I know it's a new season, but we've talked about the Black Hole, and we've talked about how it's not a very good movie, but there's a lot to like about it. And I was watching it again on Disney Plus the other day.
It looks great on Disney
and,
Plus.
You just have to
Just
be
turn
prepared
down the
for the
sound.
fact that it has the whatchamacallit.
It's so interesting.
Overture. Thank you.
To have the sort of this gothic, kind of, what is that type of architecture, Victorian architecture to a space movie? Yeah. It's very interesting.
It's
A spaceship that looks like the Queen
it's
Anne's.
steampunk, really.
Kind of, yeah.
I guess.
I mean, because it's sort of that Victorian kind of Jules Verne kind of.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
a British railroad
well,
station.
because all
or
it
something.
was supposed to be 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea in Space,
Yeah.
Right.
and it kind of is.
But not.
I like Maximilian
Maximilian
Schallon as Hans Reinhardt. I think he's a hoot. And apparently the only reason he did it was because Disney said, you only have to work so many days. We're going to pay you a bunch of money and bring you to LA. And he had a script he had to write. And so they put him up somewhere where he could write. It was like totally like the weirdest thing.
We could go back to the beginning, A Trip to the Moon.
Oh, that's
George
actually
Miller.
a
That's
really
true.
good choice.
That's true. That's the.
Bullet Time.
That's it.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Put your eye out.
A Trip to the Moon is a really great choice. I mean, although how do we fill in 90 minutes on the 4:30 movie?
A movie
With the
that's,
trip
what,
to-
20 minutes long?
Trip to the Moon, you know.
Show it 6 times
That's
in a row.
okay. It seems longer.
Well, but you know what? You look at what about any of those George Powell movies, like
Right.
when Worlds Collide, which is
Right.
a
Yeah.
super fun movie. Earth is about to. It was the granddaddy of all these disaster movies,
And you know,
Quatermass in the pit.
Rocket Ship XM,
Oh,
which is a crazy space movie,
yeah. Well, we better decide because time is slipping into the future
and time and space are the same thing.
and they're colliding. So,
I don't know. I can't pick
Day
one.
the Earth Stood Still. We're not really in space.
Yeah. Although it is a space movie, it comes from outer space.
Oh,
I think.
what about
E.T. or
it
Close
came-
Encounters.
what about Stella Star? Star Crash.
Star Crash?
Oh,
Gosh.
wow.
With Carolyn Monroe and Christopher Lee's in Starship Invasions.
That's
Excuse
right.
me.
That's right.
I stand corrected. Carolyn Monroe is indeed in Star Crash.
And Hangar 18.
Oh, God. Oh, God.
Cat from Outer Space?
I've only seen Hangar
Cat from
18
Outer
once in my life,
Oh,
and
it's
it scarred
terrible.
me for life as a kid.
Brought
I
to you
was
by the Helsinki formula.
dumped in a movie theater. Directed by Jim Conway, who later went on to direct Enterprise, which explains a lot.
Fascinating.
We got to pick something. You'd think for Space Week, we would, this would be a no-brainer.
I think that's
Close Encounters we've done on Spielberg
we've done,
Week.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy because
E.T.
you would think there would be a lot of them. There's not a lot of them that are good.
That's true. There's a lot of bad space movies. A lot of bad. Oblivion is a little movie I like.
Oh, yeah. Tom Cruise.
I don't hate that movie.
Yeah.
With Tom Cruise, Edge of Tomorrow, but that's Earth. That's not really space.
Right.
It's more an alien invasion movie.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think we're at an impasse because I think we don't know. We don't know what to do about Friday.
We don't know.
What
I
do we
can't
do
believe
on
I know.
Friday?
Spaceballs? It
Boy,
says space
the
in the
ultimate
title.
punt.
How can you not go with Spaceballs? It's space right there. It's right there in the title. Spaceballs.
You
It
have
could also be good for Balls Week. So
oh my
For
goodness.
Sports Movie Week.
I don't want to do Balls Week.
Well, good, because you won't have to.
Good. I don't know.
Wow.
I don't
awkward
know.
Pause.
I can't believe for Space Movie Week,
we're
we're going
stumped.
down in
We
flames.
may have to throw this out to the Twitter contingent.
Yeah.
Or ask Bill Ritter.
There
Well,
we go.
you know what? Let's
Grab
do that.
it.
Let's ask. We have some people, in the John Gill Memorial Box Theater, in our new recording studio. Let's ask Bill Ritter. We're at an impasse for Friday. If it were up to you, what would you pick?
How about Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy?
Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. The problem with that is I like the book, the radio show, and the TV show more than the movie.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Sorry, Bill.
But it's a good choice. What about you, Natalie?
You just said it, Spaceballs.
Yeah, see, there's another vote for Spaceballs.
I have no problem putting Spaceballs in there.
Sure, why not?
What enthusiasm? We have so
I
much.
wanna-
You said you had enthusiasm for the mission at the beginning,
I
but
did.
I don't sense any enthusiasm. I sense that that we're running out of time. We need a pick. Let's just go with Spaceballs, which is kind of how I feel about that. But I'm not a huge fan of the movie, but I do think it's right for this week.
Why is everyone looking at me?
Let's go with Spaceballs.
Okay.
It has enough funny stuff in there. We all love Mel Brooks. How can you not love
Mega
him?
Maid goes from suck to blow.
It's a funny. It's funny. So the problem was you felt an authenticity to Mel Brooks' movies. Like he loved westerns and he parodied it. He loved Hitchcock movies. He
Yeah.
parodied it. It felt like a
Spaceballs
cash
makes
in.
it show that
Yeah.
he actually never watched those movies.
Yeah, that's kind of how it felt. Although I remember for the first time I saw it, I really did laugh out loud during the tap dancing alien chest burster
Well, of
scene.
course, because it's funny. It's the one funny scene in the whole movie,
Yeah,
in my opinion.
Okay.
Well,
Well,
how about
again,
something like Contact?
That's hilarious.
but no. But I think the point we're saying, I think, and we've said this before, is we're not picking the best. We're not
Yeah,
picking the greatest. We're picking
Ones that we like.
the ones
Right.
ones that fit into a certain rhythm. It's like music.
Right.
And it seems like
It's like
Spaceballs
poetry.
might be the adagio or the whatever, the coda for this week. It feels right.
I think Spaceballs is the da-da-da-da-da-da end to the week.
Yeah, probably. Okay, well, look,
Sure.
we're going to pick Spaceballs, but we're going to leave it open to the audience to tell us why we're wrong and to make their own suggestions. So, without any further ado, Monday, Steve Melching.
The Right Stuff.
Tuesday.
2001: A Space Odyssey.
Wednesday.
2010, the year we make contact.
I love that. We've never had an original and a sequel like that. That's really funny. And Thursday, my pick was Starship Troopers.
And Friday,
Is
the
Spaceballs.
ever-popular Spaceballs.
As you can see
Inexplicably,
by our
Spaceballs.
enthusiasm. Anyway, this has been Space Movie Week on the 430 Movie. We want to thank you, as always, our audience, for joining us. If you liked the show generally, you should vote 5 stars on Apple Podcasts.
If you've liked previous
a
episodes of
particular
this
episode
podcast.
is not your cup of tea. And if you're a fan of this podcast, please check out Electric Surge's other really enjoyable podcasts. Glorious Trexperts, the only podcast for Star Trek fans with a life, every Saturday. Rebel and Rogue, a Star Wars podcast, the upcoming Doctor Who podcast, Two on Who, and of course, Best Movies Never Made, every other Monday. And if you've enjoyed this podcast, please rate us 5 stars on Apple. You can also watch the 430 Movie on Electric Now, available on the Stirr, Distro TV, and Xumo TV apps, and coming soon to the Electric Now dedicated app. And again, a very special thanks to Bill Ritter and everyone here at Electric Surge Network, especially producer Natalie Muscali, and of course, Dean Devlin, without whom this show would not be possible. So until next week, we're going to space, and you're going to watch Eyewitness News, which is next. Goodbye.
This week's episode is brought to you by Off-World Colonies, a golden land of opportunity and adventure, and by the Tyrell Corporation, more human than human.
You're listening to the Electric Surge Network.